Hello everyone and welcome to AI Seeking the Truth. This is our new channel, guys. If you have not subscribed, reach down, hit the subscribe, select the bell, select all so you get all of our latest content. This is not AI investigations. A lot of people confused it with that. This is a separate channel that will have separate stories. It doesn't quite fit the AI channel. And Kaylee will be narrating a lot of these videos. Also, I would like to say, Hunter, I love you so much. I hope you're feeling better, buddy. And everything that you're seeing us do on all three of these channels is for you. And whenever these all three become monetized, we're going to be helping you with everything we have, buddy. I love you so much. You're on my mind every day. And I'll see you soon, buddy.
Hi guys, so today I will be narrating this encounter that an anonymous person sent to us, and they said, Mike and Kaylee, I want to share this terrible story with you, and I want everyone to know that evil is everywhere. I think the woman in this encounter was a witch. So I'd really love to hear y'all's opinion in the comments and know how you feel about this encounter, because I find it really interesting. So let's get into it. I'll never forget the terror I felt as a child when our mean and old neighbor would yell at me and my friends for setting foot on our lawn. Her anger was terrible, and her harsh words still echo in my mind today. One encounter in particular changed my life forever. I was playing tag with my friends in our front yard when I accidentally stepped onto her grass. She burst out of her house, her face red with rage, and began screaming at me. I froze, paralyzed with fear, as she berated me. The memory of that moment has stayed with me, and I still feel the anxiety and fear it evokes. It's a painful reminder of the impact someone's cruelty can have on a child's life. Even now, I struggle with the lingering effects of that trauma, but I'm working to overcome them and find peace. As I stood there, frozen in fear, my brother stepped forward, his face in a fierce determination. He was only 14, but he seemed like a giant to me in that moment. He yelled back at our neighbor, his voice firm and strong, "Leave him alone. He's just a kid." Then, in a move that still amazes me to this day, he walked onto her grass, his eyes locked on hers, daring her to try something. "Come on, try to remove me," he taunted. Our neighbor was shocked by my brother's bravery. She seemed to shrink back, her anger deflated by his courage. She muttered something under her breath and stormed back into her house. I was in awe of my brother's bravery. He had stood up for me when I needed it most, and he had faced down our mean old neighbor with a fierce determination that I had never seen before. From that day on, I looked up to him in a whole new way. He had shown me that even in the face of fear and intimidation, courage and determination could triumph. I was playing in the front yard when I saw Mrs. Wilson's car coming down the driveway. I remember feeling a sense of dread as she swerved her car onto the grass, deliberately heading straight for my cat Fluffy, who was lounging in the sun. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. In slow motion, I watched as her car tires rolled over Fluffy's tiny body. I felt like I was in a nightmare, unable to move or speak. The sound of Fluffy's terrified meow still haunts me to this day. Mrs. Wilson's face was twisted in a cruel smile as she glared at me. Her eyes gleaming with malice, she knew exactly what she had done, and she was enjoying my pain. I was consumed by a rage and grief that I had never felt before. My brother saw the whole thing and came running out of the house, yelling at Mrs. Wilson. He was furious, but I was numb, unable to process what had just happened. The memory of that day has stayed with me, a painful reminder of the cruelty that some people are capable of. I was still trying to process the horror of what had just happened when Mrs. Wilson appeared on her porch, holding Fluffy's lifeless body in her arms. She started making mocking cat noises, meow, 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 her voice dripping with sarcasm. She was laughing and dancing around on her porch, her eyes gleaming with a sinister light. It was like she was taunting us, reveling in our pain and suffering. My brother and I were frozen in shock. unable to comprehend the cruelty we were witnessing. She was eating a sandwich, her dress stained with Fluffy's blood, and her eyes gleamed with a malevolent gleam. The scene was surreal, like something out of a nightmare. I felt like I was trapped in a living hell, unable to escape the horror of that moment. Mrs. Wilson's behavior was bizarre and disturbing, and it left a lasting scar on my mind. Even now, I shudder at the memory of that twisted, cruel woman and her sadistic behavior. I tried to escape the trauma of the day by listening to my brother's drumming, but even that was short-lived. Mrs. Wilson's voice pierced the air again, complaining to our mom about the noise. My mom, always trying to keep the peace, told my brother to stop playing. I tried to tell her what had happened about Fluffy and Mrs. Wilson's cruel behavior, but she wouldn't listen. She just patted me on the head and said, "Oh, don't be dramatic, sweetie. It was just an accident." But I knew what I saw, and I knew that Mrs. Wilson had enjoyed causing us pain. My brother and I exchanged a frustrated glance. We both knew that our mom wasn't hearing us, wasn't believing us. It was like she was choosing to side with the mean old woman over her own children. I felt a deep sadness and frustration, feeling like I wasn't being heard or believed. In that moment, I realized that sometimes even the people who are supposed to love and protect us the most can fail us in the worst ways, and it's a painful lesson that I've carried with me to this day. My brother's anger had been simmering all day, and as the darkness fell, it finally boiled over. I watched in a mix of horror and awe as he picked up a rock and hurled it at Mrs. Wilson's porch. I don't think he intended to hit her, but his aim was wild and the rock sailed straight at her. Mrs. Wilson let out a blood-curdling scream as the rock struck her, and she clutched at her head, stumbling backward off the porch. My heart raced as I watched her fall, a mix of fear and guilt washing over me. My brother's eyes went wide with shock, and he took off running, disappearing into the night. I was left standing there, frozen in fear as Mrs. Wilson struggled to her feet, her face contorted in pain and anger. I knew that my brother's actions would have consequences, and I braced myself for the fallout. But in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction that Mrs. Wilson had finally gotten a taste of her own medicine. But the horror wasn't over yet. As the evening fell, Mrs. Wilson returned home, her gold Cadillac gleaming in the fading light. My brother was playing in the driveway, lost in his own world, when she pulled in, and then in a moment that's etched in my memory forever, she gunned her engine and deliberately ran over my brother. The sound of his scream still haunts me. She backed over him, then ran over him again, her tires screeching in a cruel mockery of his suffering. And then she had the audacity to jump out of her car, screaming and pretending it was all an accident, begging for help and sympathy. I was frozen in shock, unable to move or speak as I watched my brother's life slip away. The memory of that moment has haunted me for years, a constant reminder of the evil that lurks in this world. And Mrs. Wilson's cruel laughter still echoes in my mind, a chilling reminder of the pain she inflicted on us. I couldn't believe my eyes. Just a few weeks after my brother's funeral, I heard the sound of drums playing outside. I ran to the window, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Mrs. Wilson was sitting in her yard playing a drum set, her eyes fixed on me with a twisted grin. She was laughing, actually laughing, as if she was enjoying some sick joke. The drums were an eerie echo of my brother's own drumming, the same drumming that she had complained about just before she took his life. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, and my mind raced with horror and anger. How could she be so cruel, so heartless? Did she have no remorse, no conscience? The drums seemed to be mocking me, taunting me with the memory of my brother's passion, now silenced forever. I turned away, unable to bear the sight, and collapsed to the floor overcome with grief and rage. The sound of those drums haunt me still, a reminder of the cruelty and evil that exist in this world. Justice may have been served, but the wounds ran deep. I was relieved when I heard that Mrs. Wilson had been killed in a tragic accident, her own life cut short in a cruel twist of fate. She had been driving on the highway when her tire blew out, and she had pulled over to change it, but as she was fixing the flat, a semi-truck barreled down the road, striking her and killing her instantly. I was shocked when I heard the news, but I couldn't help feeling a sense of closure. She had taken my brother's life, and now hers was taken too. It was a grim reminder that our actions have consequences, and that justice can be swift and merciless. But even that couldn't bring me peace. To this day, I still carry the scars of that traumatic experience. The sound of screeching tires, the sight of a lifeless body, the memory of my brother's bright smile snuffled out forever. It all still haunts me. And the smallest things can trigger it. A dead animal on the side of the road, a child's laughter that sounds like my brother's, even just the sight of a drum set, it all comes flooding back, and I'm transported back to that fearful day. But I want my story to serve as a warning, a plea to all parents and adults to listen to children, to believe them, to protect them. Don't dismiss their fears, don't ignore their cries for help, because if you do, it may be too late. I'm in my 70s now, but the pain still feels like yesterday. I hope that by sharing my story, I can spare others the same agony. Believe your kids, please. They're counting on you. Years later, Mrs. Wilson's son came to clean out her house, and he made a shocking discovery. He found pictures of my family and me in her bedroom, along with a rock that seemed to be special to her. It was displayed in a glass cabinet next to a photo of my brother. Her son was puzzled, wondering why his mother had kept these mementos. He shared his findings with my mom, and she was stunned. It seemed that Mrs. Wilson had been obsessed with us, even though she had treated us with such cruelty. The rock, in particular, was an eerie reminder of her fixation. But that wasn't the only chilling revelation. The son also told my mom that the family who had lived in our house before us had a child who had gone missing. The son's words left us with more questions than answers. What had really happened to that child? And what had driven Mrs. Wilson to such evil behavior? We may never know the truth, but one thing is certain. Mrs. Wilson's legacy is one of pain and suffering, and her memory still haunts us to this day. Well, guys, I would really love your opinions on this encounter, because I think my opinion on this would be like they said, parents need to listen to their kids. They need to believe them. If anything is suspicious with what your kids are telling you, please listen to them, and just be aware of things and just watch out for your kids, and just make sure they stay safe, and just keep an eye out. But I would love to see your comments and know what y'all think about this. Thank you for watching.